Welcome to the deep dive. This week, we are moving into territory that is, it's intensely personal, often confusing, and for many, sometimes really painful. We received so many searching questions from you, questions that cut right to the core of identity. Things like, why was I born this way? Am I a mistake? Or, is there even a place for me in God's design when I feel like I don't fit?
And these aren't abstract debates, are they? They're heart-searching. They're about belonging, about meaning. And if we look at the source material through that lens, you realize we're seeking clarity, yes, but also tenderness, not just theological bullet points.
Exactly. And our sources this week offer a really powerful lens to view all this through. It's a central metaphor that we think fundamentally shifts the conversation, the grammar of mankind and God's handwriting. So this deep dive, it uses the relationship between grammar and writing to understand the relationship between biology and gender, all within a framework of divine intention.
Yeah, and our mission today is really to address that overwhelming feeling that you might be a typo
A typo, right?
or a revision in the text of creation. We're exploring the source's assertion that life began with this perfect, coherent order, an order where biology and gender were designed to be two harmonious expressions of one divine meaning, not these competing, warring concepts we see today.
Okay, let's unpack that metaphor of grammar first, because for most of us, you hear grammar and you just think restrictive, rigid rules, something imposed by some distant authority.
Right, and we have to get past that modern baggage. The word grammar itself, it comes from the Greek gramma, which means a letter, a mark, or something written. The root verb, graph, it means to write. So at its very inception, grammar just meant the knowledge of letters or writing. It was about recognition and understanding.
The ability to interpret what's written.
Exactly. To interpret it, to articulate it. It was not a list of do's and don'ts.
That's a huge distinction. So it's not about being controlled, it's about being comprehensible. It gives the writing its meaning. So how does the source define the original harmony of this?
Precisely. In its original design, grammar was the inner logic of writing, the invisible pattern that allowed expression to make sense. The source describes this as law defined through love, a commandment that was built on understanding. The law wasn't a burden. It was the framework that gave love a vocabulary.
So the foundation of the law is understanding, not just obligation. But if that was the case, why did it shift? Here's where it gets really interesting. What happened?
Well, only later did this concept transform. It became a demandment, regulation. What was meant to cultivate comprehension started. Well, it started enforcing truth. And this, the source argues, is the perfect mirror for the tension many of us feel.
That tension between divine order and personal experience.
Yes. When law and love get separated, the system breaks.
Yeah.
And we start fighting the very architecture that was supposed to sustain us.
Okay, so if that original, more graceful definition of grammar provides the structure and writing brings the sound and the spirit, how does this map onto us as human beings? Where do biology and gender fit in?
Biology is the grammar of mankind. It's order. It's faithful, steady. It's the architecture of life. It is the physical letter God spoke in flesh. The body isn't an accident of matter.
It's an arrangement of profound messages.
Right. So when you ask, what is the purpose of my biology? The answer is to provide structure and to carry meaning.
And the source reminds us it's not random. It quotes Genesis, describing man being formed from the dust and then receiving the breath of life.
Right. It's fundamentally relational. Our form has meaning. Our life is written within an established order. So for the listener asking, is God disappointed with the way I am? The source powerfully counters with Psalm 139. You knit me together. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God's order is not a prison. It's a promise. It gives a shape so we can carry the meaning he intended.
Okay, that's the stable architecture, the grammar. So if biology is that foundational structure, the firm rule of the letter, what role does gender play?
Gender is the writing of expression. It's the living movement of meaning, the art of expressing what that form has already made possible. Gender is fluid, but not without form. It's creative, but not without coherence. I see. It's the way our identity speaks, how essence becomes experience. So does God value your gender?
Yeah.
Yes, because it's the mechanism by which the ordered essence of the soul is communicated to the world.
But a lot of people today feel they have to choose between their biological form and their expressed identity. I mean, if you're experiencing the significant internal misalignment, how does the source define harmonize without it just feeling like self-denial? Isn't that an impossible ask for many?
That is a crucial challenge, and the
Right.
source is clear. Gender is not the rejection of biology, but its interpretation. It's the art of living our form beautifully, translating structure into expression. Harmony, in this context, isn't a demand for uniformity. It's a call for integrity, that the inner experience speaks truthfully about the outer form. The goal is unity, not erasure.
This is where Galatians 3.28 comes up. Where Paul says in Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. If our identity is in Christ, why bother with the biological distinction at all?
I think people misread that. Paul didn't erase difference. He revealed its unity in Christ. That verse means your primary identity, your place at the table, isn't determined by your earthly distinctions. But those distinctions are still real. Form finds freedom only when that freedom honors form. The writing of gender finds its purpose when it harmonizes with the grammar of biology. The letter is fulfilled by the word, not fought by it.
A word only becomes powerful when it agrees with the essence of the sentence it's in, which brings us to the warning in the source. What happens when that writing tries to ignore the grammar?
And we need to approach this with empathy, because the desire to define oneself often comes from profound pain and misunderstanding. But the source warns against a specific philosophical starting point. The world began believing that identity could be entirely self-authored.
And completely independent of any form.
Yes, and that freedom meant discounting the divine architecture altogether.
So this is a critique of a philosophy then, not a condemnation of a person's honest struggle.
Exactly. The source suggests that when we attempt this self-authorship, we find that freedom without a foundation is just noise, not music. Expression without essence becomes confusion, not creation.
And this speaks directly to that deep fear of feeling misunderstood.
It does. The source suggests that when gender tries to dethrone biology, identity can become performance instead of purpose, a constant effort to manage how you're perceived rather than living from an internal reality. We get so focused on the revision that we lose the meaning of the original letter.
The real tragedy, then, isn't just the confusion itself, but forgetting the author of that original letter.
Yes. The real tragedy is forgetting the one whose image we express. We aren't random letters. We're words written in the breath of God. To try and fully rewrite ourselves is to risk losing the meaning of our own text.
But let's get into the deep, personal pain points here. I know so many listeners are asking, if God wrote me perfectly, why do I struggle so much? Why didn't God make me simpler or normal? The source has to address the fact that some lives carry what it calls extraordinary details, complexities that defy easy categories.
This is maybe the most crucial section for anyone whose journey is complex. The source emphasizes, extraordinary does not mean error. Complexity is real, but it doesn't override God's underlying intent. Just as grammar has deep, specific variations, God builds every life on a deeper truth, a design placed in the soul. That extraordinary feature might just be a deeper letter, more detailed script.
That's a profound reframe. We treat complexity like a flaw, but the source sees it as just more detail. This leads us to the metaphor of the thorn in the flesh, which really speaks to those feelings of weakness or chronic limitation.
Yes, the discussion of Paul's thorn is vital here. That weakness, that thorn, whether it's a biological complexity or a profound internal tension or just external misunderstanding, it's not a flaw in God's craftsmanship. It's a doorway where grace enters.
He didn't remove the thorn.
He didn't. He redefined it. He said, "My grace is sufficient for you." The limitations in your life don't diminish the letter. They deepen it. They reveal dependency. Weakness is not identity. It is the invitation where God's strength rests.
Okay, can you give us a specific example of how that reframing of weakness changes someone's daily life?
Well, when weakness is an invitation, not a condemnation, it changes the question from "why did this happen to me?" to "what is God revealing through me?" It means when you feel that heavy weight of being misunderstood, instead of retreating into self-pity or aggression, you're invited to draw strength from the grace that operates precisely in that complexity.
But that's so hard when you're facing mockery. The source notes that people respond with endurance, courage, and sometimes, understandably, with pride. How do we navigate that? Is it wrong to be proud of your own endurance?
It's not wrong to be courageous, no. But the source differentiates that from pride. Pride is the assertion that my identity is self-built, self-sustaining, independent of God's design. And it often rises when we're just weary of being treated like a question mark. But identity is God-revealed. And even extraordinary features don't cancel the call to holiness, to direction, and to surrender. Holiness here means aligning the letter. Surrender means trusting the author, even when the writing is painful.
And the source brings in Jesus' perspective on the man born blind to really solidify this point. That man wasn't a mistake. He was a letter reserved for God's glory.
Right. This happened so the works of God might be revealed. Jesus never saw people as problems to be solved. He saw them as letters whose meaning was still unfolding. He never said, fix yourself and then follow me. He said, you're not a problem to be solved, you're a person to be revealed. Renewal isn't denial of your struggle, it's the revelation of the truth already written in your soul.
This brings us back to the ultimate alignment then, the perfect coherence between the grammar and the writing. How do we move toward that?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Jesus is the perfect alignment. He is God's writing, perfectly expressing God's grammar. He didn't erase divine order, he embodied it. He lived in perfect unity, spirit, soul, and body in harmony. Through him, command becomes compassion, and grammar becomes a writing of grace.
So to follow Jesus is to come back into alignment, to live where biology and gender, law and grace finally speak the same language again. And then obedience, it stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like peace because you're no longer fighting the structure.
And that transition from pressure to peace often involves this shift from thorn to cross. Look at Gethsemane. Let this cup pass from me. That was the honest language of the thorn, the human tension, the weariness. Yet not my will, but yours. That was the surrendered language of the cross, the aligned perspective. The thorn is acknowledged, but the final direction is set by the will of the author.
The cross then interprets every single story, even the complicated ones we think are too messy for guide.
It does. The cross teaches that God brings purpose from pain, beauty from complexity, identity from uncertainty. He doesn't discard complicated letters. He reads them, redeems them, and rewrites them with glory. The call is to live as he lived, honoring the grammar and expressing it with grace, trusting that he's the only one who can truly unify your body and soul.
So to summarize our deep dive, the core lesson is, well, it's simple, but its truth is profound. We were never meant to choose between law and love or between biology and gender. We were meant to live in their harmony. Biology is how God ordered. Gender is how we express what he ordered. They aren't rivals.
They're reflections. When biology and gender agree under the leadership of the spirit, light and understanding fill the soul. The body tells the truth and the soul sings it. You are not a typo. You are not a revision. You are God's handwriting, a story formed by order and filled with grace.
That is a truth worth meditating on. And to leave you with a final provocative thought for reflection. If holiness straightens the lines and surrender clarifies the letter, what one extraordinary detail in your own life might God be using right now, specifically through the tension of it, to reveal his greatest strength?
Consider how you can live today as a living letter that reveals the heart of God, not by denying the complexity, but by surrendering the narrative.
We'll catch you next time for the next deep dive.